Hello and welcome to Zenatta Consulting's monthly webinar. This one is on Zoho Recruit. We're going to be covering an overview and best practices and taking you through everything you would want to know about Zoho Recruit, at least to get started. From Zenatta Consulting, I'm Brett Martin.
And I'm Tyler Colts, and let's get right on into the webinar.
All righty, so a couple of things here. If you have, before we kind of get to this agenda, if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box and we will answer them at the end of the show. If you put them in chat, we might see them, but we might not. So the Q&A box is probably the better place for them to be. So what are we going to cover here? We're going to cover everything you might want to know to get going, why you need an ATS, which is an applicant tracking system. Then I'm going to go through a complete overview and features, where you find everything, how you kind of get things, the basic things set up. And then Tyler's going to take you through an entire getting started portion of this, where we basically do the creating a job opening, forms and assessments, job board integration, and the candidate pipeline. And then at the end, we will wrap it up with a Q&A. So with that, let's talk about why you need an ATS. If you aren't familiar, an applicant tracking system is really just a way for you to keep track of people who are applying for jobs with your company. So you have a portal and people can go in and they can apply. They can basically post their resume direct. You can do job board postings directly from it. So if you're using Monster or Indeed, you can directly post out directly to that. When applicants do apply, you've got really nice management. You can rate them and you can actually parse their resumes. You also have a place to store your resumes. And of course, the main thing you're going to want to do is schedule interviews with these people. And most applicant tracking systems will help you do all of that as well. But in a nutshell, it's just a really, really nice way to, you've got a lot of jobs that are available and you've got a lot of people applying and you want to track them. This is for you. All right, so let's kind of take you through some overview and features. So as you look at the overall homepage of Zoho Recruit, you will notice if you're a Zoho user, it looks an awful lot like Zoho CRM. These are very, very closely related. As a matter of fact, they're virtually identical, with the fact that Zoho Recruit has got 5 different modules that kind of make it for just using job boards. This is what's missing from the CRM. But other than that, if you're familiar with Zoho CRM, you're going to easily be able to get around inside of Zoho Recruit. Really straightforward that way. So the homepage, that's where you can build your dashboards. It gives you, lets you know right off the bat, you know, how many actives, how many applicants, how many offers you have out, all of those kind of things. On the job opening tabs, whatever job openings you have, they're going to be listed here, whether they're active, whether they're in progress, whether they're closed out. And you can also do the custom views. So this is kind of important when you have job openings. If you're familiar with custom views inside of Zoho CRM, this allows you to filter, like I only want to see job openings that are in progress. I only want to see job openings that are closed out. So you can kind of look at those as well. So as you kind of grow your business and build out your Zoho Recruit, you'll be able to filter those various records. Then candidates, all of your candidates, as they flow in, you will see them here as well. And then any interviews you set up, all of those interviews, the candidates, the department name, the status of that interview, they'll all flow in here as well. And then you've got your overall assessments that you can put out, which will have various questions that you can give to the class, such as screening. And then, you know, we've got some basic ones here, pre-screening assessment, a general assessment, a standalone questionnaire. And you can customize these. You know, if you're hiring a coder, perhaps you want to ask them a series of questions. If you're hiring an admin, maybe you just want to understand their general knowledge of office products and how those work. You know, how good are they at Excel? So you basically can customize these assessments, and those will be scored and actually be attached then to the overall applicant. Then you can set up all of your departments. So you've got a development department, you've got a marketing department, sales department, who's in charge of those, who's doing the interviewing, all of those kind of things. And again, if you're familiar with CRM, you've got the standard to-dos. So all of the to-dos that are associated with working with the applicants, you need to have a follow-up phone call. You got a new candidate, you need to check out their resume. All of those to-dos can come in here as well. And then if you are familiar with the little settings gear inside CRM, it's over here as well. And the interesting part about that is it looks exactly like the CRM settings. And most of it is pretty much the same, but there are 4 areas here we're going to talk about that are different and you really need to pay attention to when you're setting up the Recruit product. So let's start with resume management. We're going to go through this one kind of quickly. This is a resume parser. So when resumes come in, they arrive by email, and it is basically able to go through and parse that resume and put that data into the CRM automatically for you. It works fairly well, and you can try this out, but there's really not much to it. It's really just mapping the fields that are going to be on the resume with the fields that are in Zoho Recruit and hoping that the parser is good enough to kind of sort through those and put them in the proper spots. And then once you've done that, you set up a resume inbox. So a resume comes in, and you're basically going to want to forward that, do like a BCC to whatever email address they're going to give you here. You'll see there's a random email address on the screen, the JSG92TV at resumes2.zohorecruit.com. That's where the resume is going to come in. And then you've got a whole lot of different parsing modes that you can do. You've got lenient, which is, it's going to be very high success rate from importing it, but the accuracy is going to be a little bit low. Then you can go moderate, where it's going to give you a balanced success rate, as to whether it's actually successfully able to do it. Then strict, if it can't actually parse it perfectly, don't even bother. The success rate will low, but the accuracy is pretty high. Honestly, Tyler, I think we've played around with these a little bit. I think the lenient's a good one because you get the first name, last name, email, and then you might want to do the rest. But other than that, it's kind of one of those things where, you really do want to look at the resume and not trust this.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky because, some resumes are going to come in as a PDF that doesn't actually have the encoded text, where it's really just treated like an image. It's going to struggle a lot with those. It does a decent job if the resume is encoded to actually treat everything as text, where you could like copy paste out of it. So your mileage will vary a little bit when you're using this, but it is a nice little tool to have, at least for that lenient mode, to be able to give someone just a simple way to submit a resume and get entered into your system.
And we'll talk a little bit about how they do these parsers and how they work here a little later on, because this is some third-party technology that Zoho is actually using for this. All right, and then moving on, you've got your career website. Now, this is kind of interesting because when you go to this little career website section, you're going to see at the very top, they've got career site, and then they've got career site beta. The career site is the original one when this rolled out years ago. And there's really not much you can do to it. You can slightly rebrand it where you can go ahead and add your logo to it. But other than that, this is kind of what it looks like. It's really basics. You've got some careers, you can register, you can apply for these various jobs. Not a lot going on there. I imagine this will be deprecated and go away very, very shortly. But until then, what you just want to do is you want to click on this career site beta. This really gives you a lot of functionality to really customize things. So in the career site beta, you can go ahead and edit the properties and get a little more granular here. So what do you want to show on the site? What language you want it to be. We talked about that custom view earlier. Do you want it to be all job openings? Do you want it only to be job openings for the sales department, job openings for the marketing department? You can do quite a bit with this, and you can build up different career sites. So you can have a career site just for sales, just for marketing, just for development, and they can be tailored just to kind of meet those needs. So you really have got a lot you can do with this overall. And then when you look at the customization part of this, now we're talking. Now you've really got a fairly nice website that you can do quite a bit with. It is highly customizable. You can edit the text. You can change the background images. You can do a ton with it. If you've got a web developer, they really can do some interesting things with this as well. It's got, remote jobs that are available. You've got nice filters. Anyway, just a much better look and feel across the board. And to kind of get a little more granular, you can actually define your sections. You can go in and edit your header. You can edit your jobs. You can edit your footer. If you know CSS, HTML, like I say, your web developer can really pretty much do anything they want with this. You can also change the overall font colors for heading, subtext, body. Again, there's just a whole bunch you can do with this as far as that customization goes. And really, really, really nice here, besides, setting your overall page settings and language, is it's completely embeddable. So you can get some really nice embed code. Once you get this designed the way you want it, you just give this code to your developer, and then your developer can go ahead and paste this onto your website, and you've got your job board online. So really, Really nice. I think it's really the only way to go is with this beta version. Spend that little extra time. It'll make your job board look good. You can kind of match it to the way your website is designed as well and get your jobs out there. And then web forms is also here as well. It's kind of an odd place to put it, but this is basically if you want to set up forms for people to apply. So if you've done anything on the CRM where you've created a web form, or if you use Zoho Forms, this is very similar type of tool. You're basically going to create a form. You're going to get that code. You're going to embed that code on your website, and somebody can use this to directly apply. So if you didn't want someone technically to maybe have to go to the portal, go to the career site, do all that, you've kind of got a job right there. You can just put a apply here button. People can go and apply and just fill this out really quickly and get that right into Zoho Recruit and get the application process going. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the job board hub. Now, this is kind of the magical part of an ATS because it's great that you can write your resume or you can put your job out there and you get it out there, but really where are people going to find you? They're going to find you on job boards. So there are a couple things Zoho does here. They've got source boosters. So if you want to actually pull in candidates directly from a job board's database, you can do that basically with a click of the button. So you can go into using these source boosters, you can go in and say, look, I want all candidates that fit this particular category. They have these qualifications. Go ahead and pull them in. I'll want to market to them directly. And so you can turn these on and go ahead and pull those various things in. Some of these you have to pay for, some of them are free, but source boosters are a nice way. If you're not getting any feedback on your job postings and you want to go ahead and market, these source boosters can really help you do that. Additionally, you've got your job board list. So the job boards, this is where you can automatically go ahead and post your job listing. So you're familiar with a lot of these, Monster, Indeed. There are pretty much hundreds and hundreds of job boards on here. The initial setting when you go in here is worldwide. You're going to kind of want to define that. So if I define it to just United States and I only want to see the free ones, Zoho automatically turns on the free ones for you. You'll notice though that kind of the ones maybe you're aware of aren't necessarily going to be free, like Career Builder, Career Jet, Monster, Indeed. You're going to have to pay for some of those. But you've got at least a decent amount of job boards you can start off with. And if you already have an account at one of these other job boards, you can easily connect to that as well. If we go down and, Google, by the way, is free. Indeed has a free plan as well. And if you want to sort down, if you're watching this and they're in the US, you've got 17 free job boards in the US. So if you go ahead and just filter it that way, say, I only want the free boards, I only want the boards that are in the US. There are quite a few. And basically, once you do this, this is automatically going to post your job listing to these boards. And people, when they apply, it'll automatically also come back into Zoho Recruit. And then you have the quick apply, and the quick apply is really nice. So this is when someone is on one of these boards, Indeed, LinkedIn, Resume Library, Seek, and Easy Apply, which is a Zoho Recruit one. Basically, this will go ahead, and if they already have their information on that job board, because they've logged in, they're part of that job board, it's going to go ahead and autofill a bunch of those fields and basically really lower your overall drop rate in these
Mhm.
situations.
Yeah, if you're planning on using one of these boards like Indeed or LinkedIn, you might as well go ahead and turn on quick apply. It's not going to do any harm. It's just going to mean that they don't have to type their name and email into your application form. Just one last thing that might cause someone not to fill out that application.
Yeah, really straightforward, and there's no reason not to have it on because it does fill that information in. And then the last thing we'll want to talk about here on the settings is compliance. Really talk a bit about this. So GDPR, if you are over in the UK, or I'm sorry, in the EU, you'll want to have GDPR on. Once you hit it on, you'll basically get some forms here that you can go ahead. It's your consent portal. You can make some slight customization to this. but people will have to fill this out for email, phone contacts, and those kind of notifications. I will tell you though, that once you turn this on, this sets up several workflows, it sets up several templates, it does a whole bunch of things. And if you ever want to turn it off, you're going to have to go reverse and back all of those out. You're going to have to delete all of those templates and all of those workflows. Otherwise, you won't be able to turn GDPR off. In the United States, you technically don't need this right now, but if you are doing business globally, it's not a bad thing. And I think it's probably just not a bad thing across the board to go ahead and turn on. Additionally, the sub processors, these are the things we were talking about that basically can do things such as parse resumes and do various data services that pull in this information. So Daxtra is one that is a resume extractor that they use, and People Data Labs actually will do enrichment on people. So basically it looks at a person and provides additional information on a candidate. Zoho just wants to let you know that they're not doing this. There are some third-party services that they've contracted with that are providing these services that are doing this for you. And then when we talk a little about the Equal Opportunity Commission, you can be in compliance with that. So what does that mean? Well, if you are doing business, if you want to have your business with a federal agency and you actually do need to comply, period, across the board with this, there are federal laws protects employees applicants from discrimination. And if you put this compliance in, then this is going to make sure that you are in compliance with the EEOC. Additionally, you've got the Federal Office of Contract Compliance Programs. This is where, if you're doing business with the federal government, you will want to have this turned on, because this will make sure that everything you're doing is in compliance with that. And so if you get an audit by the government, you will have all of your information in place to make sure that you've got the proper to-dos and everything that's associated, all your interviews, everything is in compliance with that as well. So some really nice things. Zoho's really covered a lot of bases here. This application has gotten much, much better over the years, and they've really, on the compliance side alone, they've done a lot to make sure that, you can't get in trouble as an employer, and they're kind of helping you through there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, and he's going to talk about creating a job opening.
Yeah, so now we'll kind of get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty as you go to get started using Recruit. And as you'd expect, the first thing I want to do is actually go ahead and create the job opening that you want to hire for. So to do that, we can go ahead and open up Recruit here. And from our homepage, or really from anywhere, we'll click on the job openings up there in the top left. From within our job openings, we can go ahead and use this little icon in the top right. Again, very similar if you are used to the CRM. You can either create one individually using the plus. If you were tracking this on a spreadsheet before, or if you're migrating from an older or different ATS system, you could go ahead and import all of those via a spreadsheet as well. For now, I'll walk through an example of just creating one from scratch from here within Zoho Recruit. And so one thing is, you kind of open up this page, we'll see up in the top left, we could actually choose a job template. One thing about Recruit is if you are hiring for a position that you plan on hiring for, multiple times, like I'm going to hire now, and in 6 months, I might be hiring again. You'll actually want to create a job opening for each of those hirings. You don't just want to reopen an old one. And so if you know that you're going to have a cyclical hire like that, you could go ahead and create a job template for it, which would pull in things like the title, the industry, the salary, and all those relevant items that are going to be mostly the same between different times that we hire for this role. And so once you've created those, they'll show up here within our job opening creation. And so, now I've kind of filled in some information on the page, thinking that we're hiring here for a Zoho developer. And I'll kind of run through each of these fields and how they'll play into your overall process. So first, of course, we're going to give it the job title. That's actually what would display when we post this out to a job board. So it's important to make sure that that's going to be something attractive for the candidates you're looking for. In our case, because this would be a remote position, I actually like to put that right in the title itself so that people can see that as they're scrolling a job board. I think a lot of people are valuing that nowadays. So if you are hiring remote, you want to go ahead and drop that in the title. We're going to associate this to a department and to a hiring manager as well. I do want to highlight, just because someone is the hiring manager doesn't mean they're the only one who could schedule an interview or do anything related to this job opening. But they're kind of the primary owner of the responsibility of getting this position filled. We can also highlight the number of positions that we're looking to hire. In this case, maybe we're just looking for one. You could put that as high as you'd like. And again, that will display out to your relevant job postings. We're also going to give it a title. Within Zoho Recruit, it treats those as a dropdown. So you kind of create your list of titles that you want to fill into and then select those within the particular job boards. Nice thing about it being a dropdown is that you're going to have a consistent list. So I'm not going to put developer one time and then implementer the next time. Right? You have a nice consistent list that'll be the same regardless of what the opening is for. Of course, important to know when we actually opened up this job opening. There are a couple technical things around this. So, it won't let you post to a job board if the date opened is, I think, more than 30 days in the past. So important to try to get this stuff done relatively quickly to make sure that you're able to, run any of those integrations that you want to your outside sources. We can also assign a recruiter to this. So again, kind of in that vein where I might be the hiring manager, but maybe Brett is going to be the one chasing them down and maybe scheduling the interviews on my behalf. You can actually assign that recruiter to this job opening to allow them full access based on your permissions. You can also set a job type. Again, this would be like full-time, part-time, a contract employee. We can go ahead and define what our target date is for a hire. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't hire someone after that date. It's just a nice way to know if we do pull a report on these, when we're expecting all of these various positions to be filled. Of course, we can define the relevant work experience that someone should have, maybe 1 to 3 years in the given industry. You can build out a full set of skill sets that you'd like as well if you want to associate things that way. Kind of a new feature that they're rolling out, trying to read through those skill sets and kind of do some of this mapping for you, but that's kind of early beta right now. Lastly here, we'll see we can also note the industry. So in our case, this is a technology job. You might, even though you as a company work in a specific industry, the positions that you're hiring for might vary. So you might be hiring for sales, a technology facing role, a marketing role, customer service. So you kind of want to define your industry that way to make sure that it's clear what exactly someone is applying for. And then of course, we can give it a salary or a salary range. We can contextualize this more, which I'll show you in a moment, but you want to give like a ballpark here that would display. Now, one thing that is important to know is if you're using that jobs portal, the new kind of client portal where people could log in and maybe apply to these things, the salary does display there. So it's good to give it an accurate range and, when in doubt, make that range nice and broad so that you can make decisions based on a particular candidate's qualifications or job history. Kind of continuing down the page, you can go ahead and give this an address. So, in our case, we're kind of just using our corporate address or, everything other than the street. They did add this over the course of COVID that we can actually say this is a remote job. The nice thing is that when you go and post this out to job openings, if you look at Indeed, they actually have a filter for remote jobs. And this will satisfy that filter. So defining it this way is really important if it is a remote job so that it shows up into the right groupings if people are going to find this on any of your job boards that you post to. And then last but not least here down at the bottom, we have our job description information. This is a rich text field. So you can actually have links, you can do bolded text, you can have bulleted lists, right? Any of those various things that you'd like. And again, this will post out to any of those job boards. So it's nice to make this, full of useful information so that people are able to kind of know what they're getting into as they apply to the job. Again, I want to highlight here down at the very bottom of that section, I contextualize the salary a little bit and say, depending on relevant experience, you want to keep that out of your salary field itself so that you can report on that nicely. But it's still nice to have a little bit of a call out there in the job description itself so that people know, that this is definitely a range based on that information.
And this is a real job posting and will always be. I don't care if you're watching this webinar in 6 months or a year. This is a real job posting. Reach out.
Okay, kind of moving forward here to our next slide. Sweet. So now we have our job opening here created, and it's got kind of everything that we need to actually kick off this process. So we'll see across the top, you get kind of a pipeline of, which candidates are in any of these various stages. And then again, just like in the CRM, we could always scroll down and make edits to these fields as we need to. So it's not like it's locked. It's kind of a living job opening that could be changed over time. And so now that we have our job opening created, kind of step 2 is figuring out, what do we want someone to fill out to apply for this job? And then what kind of assessment do we want to have someone take to kind of score them and see if they could be a good fit for this job opening? So we'll go ahead and jump into that here. Sweet. And so from anywhere in Recruit, we can go ahead up to the top right under our settings, a little wrench and screwdriver. And once we open that up, we'll go down here to the left-hand side of the page to web forms, which we quickly touched on earlier. So by default, when you open up web forms, you're going to have your basic candidate application. These are all just going to be pulling from fields on the candidate page. So, with that default application, you have that basic contact information, address, educational info, kind of all the basics that you'd expect. But let's say we wanted to create a unique one for this particular role. So we can go here under the Create Web Form button. We'll pull that up and we can give it a name up here in the top left. So we'll go ahead and create our developer application form. From here, over on the left-hand side of the page, we can just drag in any of the fields that we want to, ask for or require on this application form. So maybe in this case, maybe you don't care about educational details, but you care about their proficiency with certain softwares, right? Then you can go ahead and remove and add fields as necessary. Once you're done with that, we'll go ahead to the next step here, which just has a little bit of extra information. So up at the top, of course, you can confirm the name. You can drop in a form URL. That basically is a way to identify if you only want this to be able to be embedded on one web page, you can lock it that way. Otherwise, you can just put an asterisk, which means there isn't going to be a page restriction on this. So your web developer could put it on multiple pages without any issue. What you can also do is actually say that when someone applies via this form, I want them to be owned by a specific person. And this is kind of where it gets into the use case of having multiple application forms. Because maybe if we had a form for a marketing intern, well, I don't really need to own that, right? Maybe Brett needs to own that. So we can have a different form that actually dictates who's going to be responsible for this candidate once they fill it out. So in this case, let's say I'm going to be the owner of that candidate. And then down here at the bottom, we have just a couple options that you can set up. So we can go ahead and notify the candidate owner if we'd like. It does give you kind of an out-of-the-box email template that would go out, which of course you could edit. We can also acknowledge the candidates. We could send them an email back, a thank you for your application. We'll be reaching out soon. And then down at the bottom, you can actually post this through an approval process if you wish. So maybe if you wanted to have everyone go through a basic screening by like a level 1 hirer, and then once they get approved, they would actually move to that hiring manager to schedule an interview. You can kind of filter things out with some approval processes. Now, I do want to highlight, this isn't the only way to set these up. We're not going to dig too much into workflows here on this webinar, but any of these things like assigning things, notifying the owner, notifying the candidate, you could build all those out custom using workflows. This is just a quick and easy way to do it on a per form basis, just depending on how you'd like it to be implemented. And then last but not least, once you actually have that finalized, you can go ahead and embed this on your page. So it gives you a variety of different embed codes as well as a direct link. If you want to maybe send out an email blast to a bunch of candidates that you just pulled in with a source booster, right? You can go ahead and take that form and just have it as a standalone page if you'd like to do it that way. Generally, I will advise these look best if they're embedded on a page. So if at all possible, grab that and create like a landing page for it. But if you want a really quick way to send it out, you can just grab a link to it where it'll live on its own page, independent of your website. Alrighty, and so now that we have our kind of initial intake form created, we'll go ahead and create an assessment. And so really the difference between these two is that your intake or your candidate form is just that basic information, right? Name, email, professional background, basically the stuff that's going to be on a resume. An assessment is actually a way to get a little bit more granular and start scoring the candidate. And so I'll go ahead and kind of create one here. So from within our assessments, we can go ahead and add an assessment. Now we can actually do these a couple different ways. So you could add an assessment to be filled by a candidate, by a recruiter, or by an interviewer. In this case, I want it to actually be filled out by the candidate. So I'll go ahead and create one that way. And so now we kind of have a blank template here for us to go ahead and make that assessment. And so we'll get started by just giving it a name. This is our developer assessment here. I've dropped in a quick question under our first competency for what is your most comfortable coding language. Now, I do want to highlight, you could make these assessments like a quiz question with a right or a wrong answer, or you can make them kind of general or do a mix of both, right? So though there's no wrong answer to what your most comfortable coding language is, I still do care about what that answer is. And so if I go ahead and open up the settings here using the little cog, I can go ahead and change this over from a paragraph answer to a selection answer, right? So now I'm giving them a list of choices. And so, if I'm hiring for a new developer, maybe I want to ask, what's that most comfortable language? Is it Deluge, JavaScript, Python, or PHP? And then I can assign weights to each of those answers. Now, I do want to highlight they used the word weight here. It's not how you would oftentimes use the word weight. Like if you're thinking about like, I'm going to weight something by like a fraction or a percentage. These are really just the point value of the answer. And so within this, I kind of give these a point value of, hey, if Deluge is your most comfortable language, that's the best answer you could give. So that's going to be a 10. JavaScript is pretty similar to Deluge. So if you already are, a JavaScript lover, I'll give you an 8. Python's a little more different, so that gets a 7. And then PHP is kind of a different world of its own. So that's great. You get a couple points for being good at the language, but it's not as relevant as some of these others. So I'm going to give it a lower point value. So these are really nice because if you have a really significant flow of applicants, you can use these to actually score people and prioritize setting up your interviews with the people that are the best fit based on these assessments. Now, I do want to highlight it groups these into competencies. They basically function like a section. So in this case, I'm keeping this one really simple just for the purpose of our example here. But let's say I would have a section around development background. And maybe if I wanted to do like a quiz section, I'd add that as a different competency, kind of let them get used to it, filling out some basic information, and then spring some of my trick questions on them to see how they would process some more challenging questions. Okay, and now from there, we have it in our list of assessments, and it's now ready to be used in relation to a job opening to actually start getting our candidates into the system. And so with that, now we'll go ahead and jump into how you would actually post one of these out to the job board. And we did this in a particular order because these assessments and these candidate forms are actually selected as we go ahead and post them out to our job boards. And so as a quick review, again, here getting into our settings, up in the top right, we can go to that wrench and screwdriver. And I'll go through this quickly because we touched on it earlier, but under that job board setting, we can choose what we want to have turned on. So, maybe we want to post a job out to the career site. And then down here, maybe we want to post to, maybe the big 3, Glassdoor, Google, and Indeed. So we have all of those turned on and ready to go. And now we're actually ready to get our job posted out to those different sources. And so it's pretty easy to do. We'll go ahead and jump over to our job openings module, and we'll open up the job opening that we want to post. From there, up in the top right, there's this little publish button. It's green when you hover over it, but it'll just be white when you look at it by default. And so using this publish button, that'll open us up to a new page where we can actually choose which jobs we want to post this out to. So because these were the 3 that we had turned on at the time of this posting, those are the ones that are going to be available for us to actually send this out. And now that we've chosen our different job boards, now we kind of get into the specifics here. So I could say, in order to apply for this job on one of these job boards, you need to fill out the developer assessment form, not just the standard candidate application form. So I can choose that. And then I can also choose what assessment they should fill out upon, wanting to apply for this job through the job board. And so in this case, I'll go ahead and choose our developer assessment because that's the one that is the best fit for this opening. And then from there, we are pretty much ready to get this published. And so we can go ahead and publish it out just down here at the bottom. And then one little thing to note, because this might trip you up a little bit, is, with Indeed, because it is a sponsored posting, you have to have some kind of budget on file. with Indeed for it to be able to post, that budget can be very, very small. I forget exactly what it is. It's like $5 or $10. So if you wanted to just do the minimum, you just, put a $5 budget. You'd say, I'm only willing to pay, 5 cents per applicant or 5 cents per click, right? Just to give it something in the tank to get it posted out there. If you don't really want to put a big budget behind deploying this, but you still want to get it integrated through Recruit and through that job board posting. Just a little trick for you guys. If you do bump into that, you don't need to put a big budget at all. We've had plenty of clients just do a couple dollars a month just to basically turn this on. And the added little benefit of that is that it will actually promote your post on Indeed. So you'll show up a little bit above any free postings that Indeed might have running independent of a sponsorship. Alrighty, and so now we can go ahead and jump into our candidate pipeline. So that's actually what's going to happen once someone applies for this job, either on your career page or from one of your various sources. And so, looking at our candidate pipeline, as we created this before, currently we don't have anyone in the pipeline yet because we just posted our job opening. But now that we've opened up the floodgates here on Indeed and on these various sources, let's say we got our first applicant. And so with these big buckets, screening, submissions, interview, those are kind of your most broad stages. But within each of those stages, we actually have a subset of statuses that kind of go into the mix. And so, when someone comes in, they might start just as new, right? You might move them to contacted, with kind of an initial, hey, we'd love to set up an interview email that you send out. Maybe you send one out to someone and they say, hey, I'm actually looking to, I'm out of town for a couple weeks. Can you follow up with me later? You can kind of move them to a status, but have them still within the larger bucket of they're in our screening phase. And so to actually see all of the various candidates linked up underneath this opening, we can go here to the top left under associated candidates. And when we go ahead and open that up, we'll now see a list of those candidates. So right now we just have one in our screening phase for our example candidate. If I go ahead and select them, we get a whole list of options up here at the top. So kind of going left to right here, the first one, you're going to be able to update their status. Of course, you could send out an email. You could spin up an SMS or a WhatsApp if you have that integration turned on. You can go ahead and refer them to a hiring manager. You can send them an offer letter, either just through Recruit or through a Zoho Sign integration. And of course, you could kind of back them out or remove them from this job opening using this interface as well. So you'll see these icons that I'm highlighting here pop up kind of all over the place, whether you're in a job opening, a candidate. So just good to know that these are just their little quick icons for making those selections. And so let's say we wanted to go ahead and move this person over to a future status. So let's say I gave them a call. They said, great, yep, I'm ready to get an interview scheduled. Let's get this show on the road. So I want to go ahead and move them over to our new status. So use this button on the far left. And when I open that up, we'll see currently they're in that new status for our job opening. And I'll just go ahead and move them over to interview scheduled and say, they were excellent on our first screening call and, are ready to get them into this interview. Now, these comments are always going to pop up when you move status, and it's a good habit to put them in because they'll show up in a lot of key places that we'll take a look at in just a moment. So just a good habit. Anytime you're moving these, it gives you just that audit log of exactly why they are moved to a certain status. When you get into some of those compliance things that Brett mentioned earlier, these comments are actually kind of stored and logged as a history. So, if you chose to not hire a certain person, but you had a detailed comment about what went wrong, if you ever are experiencing an audit, it's really nice to have to actually know exactly why an interview wasn't scheduled with a certain candidate. And so now that we push through that status update, we'll see that now we've moved from 0 or 1 in screening to 1 in interview, and their status has updated appropriately. And so now let's say we go ahead and open up the candidate and kind of look at this from the other side of the aisle. So now we have our candidate opened, and we'll see in the top left there, we'll have that list of associated job openings. A candidate might be in play for multiple different positions. Maybe if they have kind of a wide skill set, maybe they're going to be a marketing intern, or maybe they could also be a sales intern, just based on, who ends up wanting to make the move on this candidate first. So it does treat that as a list so that you can associate them with more than one. But in this case, because we're now ready to schedule this interview, we can go down here on the left-hand side, and just like the CRM, we can go ahead and create a new interview for this candidate. If I click that plus, it'll pull up our options for a couple different types of interviews. So, I guess pre-2020, you might be doing an interview in person. I think most of the time now, it's probably going to be a video interview that you're going to do. That just basically activates, a Zoho meeting integration where you could just automatically include that link when you send out the calendar event. And then last but not least, maybe you did an interview, but it was kind of off the cuff. Maybe they gave you a call, they were, right down the street. So they just walked over and you did the interview, or, they jumped on a quick Zoom. So using that log and interview at the bottom basically just gives you a quick way to say, hey, this interview has already happened. It's in the past, and we still want to get it into the system. Because if I try to schedule one for a past date using the other methods, it's going to throw an error and say, hey, that date's in the past. We can't schedule something for that. It is nice because even if you didn't schedule it beforehand, you still want it for your reporting to know that a certain interview happened. Maybe you want to know how many interviews does it take to get from a new applicant to a hired candidate for planning your own workload. So definitely good to log these consistently, regardless of what that process actually was.
Yeah, as you kind of go through the overall candidate pipeline and candidate flow, it's very similar to working a deal or an opportunity in the CRM. You'll want to know how many candidates did it take to fill this job? Where did they stall out? How many people got past the interview? How many jobs were offered but didn't accept it? Why is that? Was our salary too low? What were the reasonings behind that? Who was doing the interview? All these kind of things. It's so important to track these, and you can kind of run the analytics on them to see where you're succeeding and where you're not, and trying to get new hires.
Exactly. And then from this page, we do have a excellent little roll up here of what their pipeline has looked like to date. So it's kind of like an expanded view of a timeline that kind of gives you a look at exactly what has happened for this candidate against a particular job opening. So, if this becomes useful because maybe you got someone all the way to an offer letter, but they never got hired, and you're wondering, why did that happen, right? Well, you could actually pull up this view and look and see, okay, we actually did our last interview 7 days ago, but we didn't get the offer letter out until yesterday. And so now they've already taken another job and we didn't get this candidate. So it gives you a nice little view to kind of track the whole history of everything that happened with this candidate through that pipeline to see, when you're succeeding, why did we succeed? And when we're not, what happened that we can fix in the future. From here as well, it's a useful page because you can actually move them through the statuses here as well. So kind of a little roll up, just looking at the pipeline from a candidate view rather than just looking at it from that job opening view.
And that's going to wrap up our overview of Zoho Recruit. We hope you enjoyed it. If you like our webinar, you can actually check out all of our monthly webinars. We always do at least one where we highlight a product or a Zoho bundle. In June, we're going to be doing Zoho Inventory Overview and Best Practices. That's going to be on June 15th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So we'd love for you to join us for that. And to stay on track of all our events, if you just head over to crmzen.com and click on the events tab, we keep track of every event in the world of Zoho, not just ours, not just CRM Zen show, but anything that Zoho is doing, anything other partners are doing, any vendors are doing. If we can find them, we're going to drop them into that little events library there. And you can just go check out that calendar and go ahead and click those as well, and hopefully register and find out some good information on Zoho. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank everybody so much for joining us. If you have any questions, please, you can email us at info@zenatta.com or info@crmzen.com, and we'll be happy to respond.
And on our websites is where you'll find all of our different webinars and pieces of content that we have put out, as well as our weekly podcast where we cover all the news in the world of Zoho rolled up in about 30 to 45 minutes. As always, you can follow us on your favorite social media platforms and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app, as well as here on YouTube. We'll see you for our next webinar.